My inspiration for my books actually comes from the frustration that I wish there was a book series like this when I was growing up that showed computers as something creative and fun, and I always had these adventures in my head when I was a small kid, and there were no books that portrayed this world or universe, and I always felt that it would be someone else who needs to write these books, but then I realized that no one else is going to make them, so I made them myself.
All right, so what makes a good short story for me is, of course, the story. What's very, very important when you're writing a short story is why. What do you want to tell? What is it that you want to say to your reader and to your audience? And then, once you know what you want to say, what story you want to tell, all the other things will come in. The character, the ambiance, the atmosphere. But if you don't know why you want to tell this story, you don't have anything. So before you start putting that pen to paper or typing those words on your laptop, figure out what is it, why you want to tell the story. And if you have a why and you have a reason why you want to tell it, you'll connect to at least one person. And that's all you can do as a writer. It's just connecting to one person, because you're not going to please everybody. But if you understand what you want to say and why you want to say it, you got yourself a good story.
The way to know that you've created a convincing character is by asking yourself if people are actually going to care about them. You need to have a couple of things, and that is their greatest strength and their worst weakness. If you know those two things about the character, then you don't even have to explain it. You can just infer it, or we will see it through their choices. But if you know their greatest strength and their what we call fatal flaw, then that is going to make people care about your character.
Sometimes when you don't exactly know what you want to put into a character, they already come alive on their own, and then you can test them out saying things and then see, does that really fit with them? Or you can visualize what they look like, what kind of clothes they would wear, what they would order at a coffee shop, anything. Try to see what they would do in their daily life and what are the weird things that you don't do but that they would do, and play around with it, have as much fun with the character, and experiment as much as possible, even if that means that a lot of the stuff that you try out doesn't work. That's advancing as well.
We humans have so many different sides to us. None of us are stereotypes that only embody one dimension. So for instance, Ruby, she's opinionated, she's fearful sometimes, she's strong, she's a problem solver. And often when you have a main character bringing other characters in that somehow complement her skills or like show the personality off in a different way, might be a helpful way to really like develop characters that have those different angles in them.
If you're true to what you want to write and what you are also able to write, not trying to imitate another author's style too much, because it's wonderful to have authors whose styles we love, but that's not necessarily ours, and we can write something that is wonderful as well without trying to copy it, and that's when something of yourself is going to come through.
For me, what made the stories unique, the ones that go all the way through, was one, what they were talking about. It was very clear what the author wanted to say. It was very clear what the author's voice was. And then what also really helped and was great was that the world they created. The characters were vivid, the world was vivid, the language spoke truth. Whether it was a sci-fi story, whether it was a mystery story, no matter what genre it was, as long as they kept truth to it, always went to the end. And it always connected to me. So keep it truthful.
I think when writing stories, especially when you're writing your very first stories, it's really important to look into those big emotions and big feelings you've had in your own life. It's not to say that you can only write about things that have happened to you, but instilling those details from your own childhood or from your own experiences can make the world come to life. So for instance, in the Ruby books, there's a lot of references to things that I felt were exciting when I was a kid. There were little adventure maps, there were the house Ruby lives in is modeled after my own childhood home, and then there's a lot of stuff that I came up with. But finding those little nuggets that were really important for you in a story growing up, that helps create a universe that is believable and that the reader can really fall in love with.
It is extremely important to revise and edit your story, because I know sometimes you'll start writing it and you'll spend a lot of time and you got that first edit done and you got that first draft done and you're like, good, it's done. But go back to it. Let it sit. Whether you let it sit for an hour, you let it sit for a couple of days, go back to it, because you're going to have fresh eyes on it. And also let other people that you trust to read it, because your story, even though it's your story, you are very biased to the story, and so you can be just in a tunnel vision and saying this is the way it has to be. But once you actually let it sit a little while and let someone else look at it, then you can see, okay, what else can I add to make it fresher, to make it newer, to make it tighter. So always re-edit. Get the bad versions out first, and then you come back and you get the gold.
I think that most of writing is editing, and that if it's also very helpful to write for a long time without even thinking about editing and just writing as you go. But then it's absolutely necessary to then reread it and see what happened during that stream of consciousness, because a lot of what you can find is that there's repetition, there's sentences that you're rewriting and rewriting to try to get the right phrasing, and you need also to have a certain back view on what you've written, so it can be helpful to leave something for a few days and then come back to it so that you've sort of forgotten what is in there, and then you can see it with a fresh mind. And definitely also sharing it with other people so that they can say what they think of it. And if you share it with 10 people and one person has a critique but no one else does, then you can think, okay, maybe that's not important. But if they all do, then that's a sign that there's some more editing should go into the process.
Vision and editing are a huge part of the storytelling. For me, it's probably like 70 or 80% of the whole process. I think I'm ready when I've done the first draft. I'm like, yes, I did it. And then comes the somewhat grueling but also exciting part of reworking, and finding really the gist of the story and what you want to tell.
I think that if you don't have a conflict or a resolution, you need to ask yourself, what do I have? A conflict doesn't have to be something very obvious, like two people who don't get along, and then at the end, the friends get along again. It doesn't have to be quite so easy, but there has to be something driving the story, and that can come in many shapes and forms, but it is necessary to have a substance.
One tip that I have for writing short stories is to limit the amount of characters you have in the story. If you have a lot of characters, combine them. But you shouldn't have more than 1 or 2 people who we see in your story.
Strive for clarity over complexity. Have long sentences if you want, but make sure that they're clear and that they're understandable. Because in short stories, you want a few things to be going on. And if you spend so much time on one description, but all the words that you're using are synonyms, then that's not very interesting.
When writing a short story, you want to keep your descriptions really short. A lot of people make the mistake of wasting precious words on long descriptions, and instead it's much better to just choose a couple of powerful descriptive words rather than waxing poetic.
Have them as much fun as possible. This is your excuse to explore whatever you want, and whether that's the final story that you end up sending or not, that's irrelevant. You're writing for yourself, and this is a time in your life when your mind is bursting with so many ideas, and some of them are really weird and we're not really meant to talk about them too much. But it's your writing. Do whatever you want. Have fun with the words that you're putting in. Have fun with how you're constructing your sentences, with the characters you're creating. They don't all have to be based off of characters or off of people you know. You can invent some out of the blue. Have the time of your life writing this. It's your opportunity.